sorts of things. But to hear the other side of it talk about weaponization is truly shocking, given what we know now. And I thought what I might do is just tell a story. And these are 100% facts. Hillary Clinton, concerned about her email scandal, works with a Soros organization to cook up this Russiagate nonsense. They feed it to the intelligence agencies. And they spy, under Barack Obama's presidency, they spy on the political opponent, the Republican, running against Hillary Clinton. He gets elected. They continue the operation, and they launder this intelligence into stuff that was meant to, by the FBI and the CIA, to sideline a presidency of a duly elected president of the United States of America, to sideline him. And that continued. You heard even some people on this committee further that nonsense for 4 years. And then the FBI is involved with pre-bunking the Hunter Biden laptop story because they didn't want him to get elected again. So they pre-bunked the Hunter Biden laptop story. The American people should have been allowed to make their own judgments from that. They weren't, because the FBI called it a Russian hack and leak operation. They were meeting with social media companies every month and every week, telling them that the laptop that they knew, that they had verified in November of 2019, they knew was real and knew was his, said it was Russian disinformation. We've heard that before. And then, after Joe Biden comes in, 3 days in, they start a censorship campaign against the country. Anybody who's a conservative. And now we also know that the FBI was weaponized in this Arctic frost investigation that tapped the phones of sitting U.S. senators. And also, the Republican Attorneys General Association, so let's pull in 2 more U.S. senators, Ashley Moody and myself, who were on the executive committee at that time. Charlie Kirk, political organizations they didn't agree with. This is not in the Soviet Union in the 1980s. This is in the United States of America in the last few years. And then, when they thought President Trump was on the run and there's no way people would elect him, and then he announces he's running for president, 3 days later, Jack Smith's appointed to get Trump. Fani Willis brings charges against President Trump, and the assistant prosecutor meets with the White House counsel's office. Why would that happen? Then you have Alvin Bragg bring his charges. The number 3 person at DOJ goes to work for him to get Trump. All in the United States of America. This continued. And Senator Hawley asked the question, wrote it down, what is happening in this country? And I hope that MSNBC is still broadcasting this, because I'm sure their viewership hasn't heard this story that's gone on for 10 years. The truth is, they never forgave President Trump for coming down the escalator at all. They didn't like him. They didn't like the disruption. And they've spent the better part of a decade not just going after him, but demonizing half the country as fascists and Nazis and threats to democracy. And they have fueled this division in their inability to accept the fact that half of the country isn't deplorables, as Hillary Clinton called her, bitter clingers, as Barack Obama called them, or trash, as Joe Biden called them. That they rose up and they sat in their own jury box and they saw all this stuff play out over a decade and they rejected it. And now you have come in, clean that up, and you are doing a great job in doing that. And let me make this clear. There is a big difference between what happened under the Biden regime and the weaponization, and then holding those people accountable. That is not weaponization. If that doesn't happen, this will happen all over again. So your job, as you talked about in your confirmation hearing, is so important that this never happens again. And holding people accountable who are part of this conspiracy is absolutely your job. And I'm also taking, you don't have to comment on this, your unwillingness to answer questions that have come up. I am led to believe, as a former attorney general, that might mean there's an ongoing investigation. You don't have to talk about it. The statute of limitations may have run on some of this stuff, but not on a conspiracy. And if you're a co-conspirator in mile marker 1, even if you want to get on the exit ramp in mile marker 5, you are liable for the conspiracy in mile marker 10. And we are at mile marker 10. And I will also say what's happening in this country. What's happening with the assault on ICE officers is truly shocking. Deportations are nothing new. Bill Clinton deported 12 million people. 12 million people. You didn't see this. The radicalization that's happened on the left that plays out with political violence is real. And by the way, let me also point out that if we had a scenario where John Thune was on the Supreme Court steps saying, "You've reaped a whirlwind, Supreme Court justices," and then a right-wing assassin tried to kill Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and then a Republican-appointed judge only gave that person 8 years, there would be riots on the streets. Cities would be burning right now. So let's just call it out. We need the cleansing here. Let's just be truthful about what's happening. This left-wing political alliance violence is not a both sides thing. It's not. And so, Attorney General, I do want to ask you a couple questions about that, because I feel like we have got to get a handle on this. Despite the overwhelming evidence that the political violence threat right now comes primarily from the left, the media just won't do it. They won't go along with it. They cite a few ridiculous studies to say that right-wing political violence is the main problem. For example, one of those studies was written by an Antifa-affiliated professor, and others count classes on prison gang, and the others count classes on prison gang violence as right-wing political violence, but refuse to count anything from the 2020 Summer of Love. Antifa attacks, like the ones that set off the explosive outside Michael Knowles' campus speech. We need good data. We need good data here. Will you commit to having the Department of Justice and the FBI research and release a public report on left-wing political violence?
Yes, Senator Schmitt.
Thank you. I also want to, after Antifa has laid siege on federal buildings and officers in Portland during the 2020 riots, your predecessor, Merrick Garland, dropped virtually all the cases against these defendants. You recently issued a new charging memo instructing federal prosecutors to aggressively pursue Antifa and other radical leftists wreaking havoc on our cities. What can you do to ensure that the various U.S. attorneys' offices follow through on your instructions?
Hopefully we will have our U.S. attorneys confirmed soon. They've been held up. Now our government is in a shutdown. Yet our prosecutors are still working. Getting all of our U.S. attorneys confirmed would be a huge step forward, Senator Schmitt. But yes, our attorneys throughout this country will be focusing on that.
And I want to thank you too. So I talked to you during your confirmation hearing and also with Kash Patel of sort of, you talked about your two pillars, which is to end the weaponization and to get back to actually crime fighting. God bless. Like, that is something that the American people support, despite what you hear from the other side of the dais today. And in those conversations, we talked about you and Kash Patel getting field agents out in the field and doing the work of law enforcement. I said, I've got just the place for you, St. Louis. And St. Louis has now received the largest per capita infusion of permanent FBI agents anywhere in the country, and they're working hand in hand with local law enforcement. That's what happens when you have state leaders work with federal partners to crack down on something I hope we could all agree is a scourge for our communities, which is violent crime. But that is not, J.B. Pritzker, I guess he wants his moment. These Portland people want their moment of defying Trump. It's crazy to me. We should all be unified in this effort of making sure our laws are enforced and taking on violent crime. But I will say, in closing with this, because you referenced the shutdown, it's the same motivation. The same thing that motivates J.B. Pritzker to stand in front of the podium and defy Trump is the same motivation I hear from my Democrat colleagues now in this shutdown. It's not about anything other than the fact, and this is a clean CR. This is what they have lectured us on making sure we do 13 times in the last 4 years. This is about appeasing an increasingly radical base to prove that they're willing to stand up to President Trump. And I don't know how we get through all this unless there's a real reckoning on the other side about that reality. But in the meantime, I'm glad you're doing what your job is, which is to be the chief law enforcement officer of this country, focusing on violent crime and keeping our communities safe.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Schmitt. And despite what they're saying on the other side of the aisle, our agents are out there working tirelessly every day to make America safe. And that was Donald Trump's directive, and we will make it happen.